Hello. I see all of you in our live interactive chat, and I just wanted to say hello and get a quick sound check before I introduce you to our beautiful special guest today, Gigi Young. I'm so excited to have her here. So if those of you who are in our live interactive chat, if you could just give me a quick little thumbs up or thumbs down with how we are sounding, make sure that you can hear both of us. Sounds good? All right, we'll go then. So, as I was saying, I'd like to introduce Gigi Young. She's absolutely just a breath of fresh air and one of my absolute favorites extrasensory luminaries, and she's just really so full of knowledge, and I just feel really blessed to have her today. So welcome, Gigi. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much, Pamela. I'm so happy to be here. So, I'm Gigi, and I'm just an intuitive consultant, and I YouTube. I do very similar things to you, actually. We're kind of kindreds in that way. And I'm just happy to be here. Happy to talk.
Awesome. So, yeah, you're just such a breath of fresh air. When I found you, I remember when I was listening to your first video, and, you know, one of our mutual friends, said, you should listen to this, this Gigi Young. She's really has a lot of the same ideas as you do. And she's just, you guys are so similar, and you teach so many of the same things, and you really need to check her out. So I did, and I'm like, oh, great, yet another person to check out. And I went to go look, and I just couldn't stop watching. I'm like, oh my goodness, you are just so authentically real and so grounded in your humanness, yet so knowledgeable about some of the things that a lot of my followers and clients and friends and family are going through, especially topics related to ascension and all of the ascension symptoms and 3D, 4D, 5D, down to the basic stuff, where you also are really, really good at helping us remain human, which I've been discussing a lot in our groups, that it is just as important to remain grounded, and applying all of this knowledge into your 3D form is the biggest reason why you're here. Like, it's great to be knowledgeable about all these things, and we're definitely going to go into it, but I just love that you help us not forget our human fractal of us. So I really wanted to get your take on this, because I watched your video recently on YouTube about the Akashic records, and I loved your perspective. And this is the first time I had heard anyone other than me say this, so I was really excited. In this very recent video you did about a week ago with the Akashic, you started talking about Atlantis and Lemuria, and you said the Akashic records will be an individual experience for each of us based upon our own, soul origins and lineage and our own records, and we're getting this individual view and perspective of the records versus their. So many people think about Akashic records as one big giant thing, and it's all the same, and I've never viewed it that way. I love how you encourage people to share their individual Akashic records perspective. So can you talk a little bit about that, and how to access the Akashic records? Do you have any tips on how to access it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to touch on why the Akashic records are experienced individually, it's because literally, as soon as you go into the higher dimensions of reality where all that information exists, it is so vast that there is no way that you could even comprehend it. There'd just be too much information. So the reason why it's personal is because we actually magnetize the information that we need dependent on the vibrational frequency that we have. So magnetics is really the way that we attract information. And so that's why it's different for everybody, because we're all a different resonance. So we attract things from a certain perspective, things in a different way. And the reason why we all have to share our way is because I'm going to get a certain piece of the puzzle based on my soul frequency. You're going to get a piece of the puzzle based on your special soul frequency. So if we put all those together, we're going to have a really good idea about what the world looks like, what the world used to look like, where it's going, and all of that. So really, anytime you're working with a vast energy like that, it really comes to you based on your personal frequency. And that's why psychics will get different information about different things too. It's because the information's coming on where they are, where their resonance is.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of how people can actually access the records, I know for me, I do have specific tips on how to help them access it and how to help us access it, but because we also come in with so many fractals of source projecting within us, and these fractals represent, from my perspective at least, I'd love to get your take on it, these fractals of the extraterrestrial beings that are coming in and projecting into our human form are also helping us with these individual spiritual gifts like yours and mine, but based upon the origins of these fractals, source projecting through us, shouldn't we focus on how to access them based upon the etheric gifts that are coming in through us? And that's not going to be the same for each of us in terms of how we access it, which gifts we use to access it. Do you think that it's going to be different for each of us with how?
Oh, so I see. So the best way to initiate the Akashic records would be to simply ask a question. And once you do that, you're immediately going to kind of burst into the Akashic records. And the way that you'll interpret the Akashic records will be based in your unique gift. So you might be an empath. So the first wave of information that you get might be emotionally or physically.
Okay. Well, it's not a bad echo, so we'll just try to continue as is. So about how to access the Akashic records, do you think that when they go in and they ask the question, that based upon their particular etheric gifts and spiritual gifts, that how would that be, say, if they are clairaudient? How would they perceive that knowledge? How do you think it would come through?
Okay, so they might go into an experience. So if they asked a certain question about Atlantis, they might start, hearing what Atlantis sounded like. They might also hear a voice talking about Atlantis. So whatever it is, the first sensation they get is going to be auditory. It's very rare. A lot of people don't have clairaudience as their first sense. Usually they have, it's usually clairvoyancy where they'll get a vision, and then empathic where there's a strong sensation, or claircognizant where it's a knowing. Usually it'll be one of those three, but if it was clairaudience, they would immediately get a certain sound resonance that would be representative of what they were trying to access, and it would be highly meaningful for them.
In terms of how to access the Akashic records with clairvoyance, a lot of my friends and family and followers ask me all the time, when I access the Akashic records, I get visions, via my clairvoyance, but then I can't tell if it's just me daydreaming. They'll say, it feels just like I'm making it up. Can you address that?
It does, and I hear this so often, and you know what it is? It will feel exactly like daydreaming. Or, for example, if you are connecting with a specific an energy, a guide, it will feel like it's you. And the trick is to keep on tuning in and tuning in and tuning in and not letting yourself doubt.
Yeah.
And really start investing in what you're experiencing and really just surrendering to it happening and really investing that it is true. And the more that you focus on that and the more that you let go, the more you'll realize slight differences. So it's like, it's kind of like if you're looking at the color red, it just seems red at first. But the more that you tune in, the more you see kind of like burgundy or maroon or pink. You have to really invest in it before you notice that it's not yours, before you notice the differences.
What I've noticed is that there's a change in the way that people are experiencing clairvoyance when they're tuning in, especially when they're tuning into their Akashic records and trying to dig into that, based upon their specific levels of awakening and where they are in their spiritual journey. I'm noticing people come to me and say, look, it seems like I am able to tell the difference now that I'm kind of waking up spiritually and going through these great, what I call it, the divine or great awakening of humanity is what I call it. But we're all going through so many different experiences with awakenings happening right now. And I noticed that the more people wake up spiritually, that their clairvoyance becomes quite different. And then they're able to tell the difference based upon um, the energy frequencies of being more in 4D when you're accessing it, and you're accessing it from the spiritual level of yourself and your higher self. And when you're doing that, it's almost like these people access it by having their spirit actually leave their body to go into it. It's like they are literally astrally projecting into the record. Have you noticed that difference?
I haven't noticed that, but I love that. I love that people are, kind of almost like disidentifying with their physical form to the point where they can journey. I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, and that's how I teach, my followers to do that. And we imagine going through a tunnel, and that the human spirit aspect of you, the fractal of you that is human, walks out of the body, and you imagine a tunnel, and then you imagine a golden book that's open at the end of the tunnel, and you can just get real visual with it. You can see the pages flipping and the light coming from
Ah,
it, and then you just walk towards it, and then you jump into it.
very cool.
And
I'm gonna try that.
yeah, and also sometimes if you know what specific record you're trying to ask, you can have that written inside of the pages of the book. Like, say, if you want to go to um, a place where you feel that you connect to, like Sirius or Pleiades,
Hmm.
or anywhere you want to go in that record, and you're connecting to something you have a record with, put that on the book, and it gives a human reference point that helps you somehow.
It's like a bridge. It's like you built a bridge.
hmm Yeah. But
Very cool.
speaking of reference points, I really liked your Atlantean, Atlantis and Lemuria video. It was probably the best description I've ever heard. And I just
Aw.
saw it a couple days ago. It's a pretty new video. So you guys should really check it out if you're into that, understanding, your records, if you feel like you connect to Atlantis and Lemuria, and the divine feminine being more represented by Lemuria, and then the divine masculine being more represented by Atlantis, and then that being the cause of the wars that happened during those times. I really strongly related to your perception in that regard. And what I wanted to ask you about that is, what about all the other races that were there during those times, like the specific types of humans that were being created by these beings that were originally on Earth before humans were even created? Do you believe that we carry any of that cellular DNA from these very different types of human races that were created during the Atlantean and Lemurian times?
What races do you mean?
Um, One of the races in my perception that I've noticed when I travel back to my records, the perception that I'm getting is that there was a split between Anunnaki beings, and that the more third dimensional Anunnaki beings that chose to stay in that particular perception in the third dimension created human beings that had very little free will. And people on the internet will basically say that they don't have free will, and that they were called the slave races and stuff like that. And then and I saw them in my records definitely, but I saw them wake up. I'm not seeing it exactly the way that other people are seeing it because, as you said, we get our own little perceptions. I felt like in my record that I was responsible for stepping in and saying, yeah, you know what? You do have divinity. Source is within you. You do have free will. So I got to see them wake up. And then the more I saw them wake up, then I started noticing that other types of human beings were being created by Lemurian races that were there at the time, and Lyran feline beings and Pleiadian beings, and that these very sentient beings that were representing the divine feminine seemed to be able to create races of humans that hold so much connection to source and the divine feminine, versus the Atlantean beings, the Zeta Reticulans, as you mentioned, that strongly connect to the Atlantean races in general, and the more third-dimensional Anunnaki beings that did not choose to go upwards in their spiritual development. These beings seem like they were very, very different, and I'm wondering, in your perception, if it's possible that we somehow carried over the DNA, cellular memories, into our projection of our human beings and our human bodies here. It's unawakened DNA, but as we wake up, are we accessing that level of our divinity or lack thereof? And could that also be causing this ascension into the egalitarian phase, where we're no longer to be just so much battle between divine feminine and divine masculine? Is our awakening to that possible cellular DNA, those possible cellular DNA differences, the cause for this shift into the egalitarian phase?
Yeah, we have lots. We basically, within our DNA, we have access and remembrance of everything that was there, including, the Mer people. The Mer people were huge within Atlantis and Lemuria, and we all remember knowing those beings. And many people remember having, Mer lives and all that. We have all of that within us. And the more that we kind of cycle into this ascension cycle, this coming together cycle, the more we remember and the more we have access to it. And the more we mend the differences, the fundamental differences that Atlantis and Lemuria just couldn't mend.
That's so interesting that they could not mend those divine feminine versus divine masculine. Why did it have to be a versus? Why did it have to be that? Because in my particular records, what I noticed is that for me, it just wasn't. It wasn't one or the other. Like how you said in the same video that we carry divine masculine and divine feminine versions of ourselves. And that doesn't matter if we're male or female, or we're more divine feminine or more divine masculine. It's all about what we're choosing, to learn in our projections in this human 3D experience. So I don't understand why, like in your opinion, why they couldn't get that. Like, why did there have to be war?
I totally know what you mean. On one hand, I feel like they didn't get it because I feel like they started so far away in the spectrum. Lemuria was so far into the feminine spectrum. It was totally a matriarchy. It, went with the rhythms of nature. It was, uber spiritual. And then here we have Atlantis, which was very far into the masculine, very much into the individual and capitalistic and developing the ego. I think that they were just too far beginning their core, their seeds, their root. I think it was too far to reconcile within that cycle. I think it was always meant to fall so that we would come to a more refined point now. And I think it's all kind of in good time. I think there was a very, very, very small percentage of Atlantis and Lemuria actually working out. And I think in order for it to have worked out and for it to kind of not fall apart, for it to not flood, I feel like Lemurians would have had to embrace their individuality. They would have had to let go of the sense of community and integrate more of a masculine, individual, independent sun, raw energy. And the Atlanteans would have had to be more community based, have more compassion in what you're doing, and think of things as a whole more. And because each individual on each island, on each place, couldn't individually do that, the whole didn't work.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
how I feel. And I don't feel it was ever really meant to. I think it was a very small chance.
Hmm. Wow. And do you think that we're getting it this time around?
I do. I feel like I'm a big proponent of that we don't really share the same future, all of us. I believe that we're constantly transitioning timelines based on our core frequency. But I do feel like we are in the middle of a big transition, and I do feel like we will. I feel like the momentum is more going this way and has been since 2012.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good because people ask
If
me
you
that
choose.
all the time. They're like, "Are we really going to ascend?" And I have such a different view of ascension, and I'm curious if you share the same views because I just haven't heard you talk very much about it, but I don't know about how you are experiencing this in terms of what people are asking you and what they want to know. But what people have been asking me is how it's going to go down. I mean, there's so many different talks about that. And on one hand, I don't want to get into fear mode. I want to remain in full authenticity and sharing everything that I'm seeing because I am seeing a lot. But on another hand, I'm saying to myself, okay, I don't want to create a resistance type of energy about ascension because when you go into fear, you go into resistance, and then you automatically aren't working in that direction anyway. And if we are even supposed to ascend, um, or if we're just supposed to be working on just being the best human that we could be, best being a relative term, and how to be integrating all of these different components of these non-human extraterrestrial fractals of our souls with our human souls is hard enough in and of itself. So would it be very beneficial during all these times to stay out of fear mode so that it doesn't create resistance, which could prevent ascension anyway? Like, are we even supposed to ascend? What's your take on all this in ascension?
Yeah, ascension, such a buzzword, such a keyword, and
Right?
um, yeah, for me, I kind of have grown to liken ascension to a quickening or a magnification. So when you talk about fear, you're right on. You are right on. Because what ascension will do is it will bring forward everything that is not you, everything that is not congruent with you, everything that you're afraid of, everything that is not love.
Yeah.
Because that is going to bring forward essentially everything we're afraid of. So
Mhm.
ascension is absolutely the process of facing our fears. Um, I don't really feel like um, ascension. I feel like it's really a natural process of integration where we really take our fifth dimensional self and our fourth dimensional self and we integrate it here into our 3D level. That's what I really feel like ascension is. I don't feel like it's so much a movement upwards or a shift in dimension as much as it is a grounding, pulling, and allowing of higher dimensions to finally exist within us and to finally be able to use our multidimensionality because we don't use it. We're not trained to use that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I feel ascension is. And that's why the fears come out is because you know what? We can't be psychic if we're scared all the time because psychic abilities are, they need a very stable, harmonized body, mind. They need that. And if you're not stable and harmonized, you're not going to integrate your psychic abilities. So, in that way, I guess ascension is also the development of our intuitive ability as well.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I completely agree. But it's just been such a buzzword because you're seeing all over the internet, where people are saying, there's going to be this, there's going to be that, and I see a ton of things, but I'm not seeing it as this big giant catastrophe like so many people are seeing it. September the
Oh,
28th, there's going to be a comet, and there's going to be, I'm seeing little things happen in these shifts. I am seeing some natural disasters, but I feel like even the perception of something big, if it were to happen, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. If something big and giant were to happen on September the 28th, based upon where we are in our emotional integration and our integration of all the fractals of us and everything that we're here to do and meeting our purposes and where we are spiritually, wouldn't we perceive that very differently? Like each person would perceive that differently if that were to happen, if something catastrophic were to occur?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing with catastrophes is nothing set in stone, and you shift realities based on your frequencies. You can, shift into a catastrophe, or you can shift out of one. The best thing that you can ever do to prevent that experience is just to remain very optimistic, very high energy, very high frequency, and that also allows you to avoid any disaster and be in the right place at the right time. I personally don't give any attention to any sort of disasters or anything like that. I don't listen to them. I just basically know that if I'm doing every single thing that I can do that day to take responsibility for my emotions and my mind, I'm doing everything that I possibly can. So that's all you can ever do. So there's no real point, there's no real value to get caught up in anything like that, because you can't it actually, I mean, all of these things, these disasters, these comments, I mean, aren't they really just kind of anchors to keep people in fear?
That's my concern. That's my
You know, that's
concern
and that's my concern.
because I feel like there are some natural disasters that are bound to happen because we live on Earth that have nothing to do with ascension. And then I feel like there are some that are having to do with what you called in your Atlantean Lemurian video, like the resets and the cycles that Earth goes through. These are natural cycles. If Yellowstone blows tomorrow, it's due. You know?
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
and
this
and if, and
natural
if you
cycle, it's
live
due. It's
near
been
there,
650 years, right? And every 650 years, it allegedly goes. So if it goes, it's going to go anyway. And that would have, that may or may not have anything to do with ascension, but it's just the cycles of Earth that are going to naturally occur within any star system and on any planet. And I totally agree with you that if we are so anchored in fear, so many people are coming to me and they're saying, well, I want to be prepared. I'm like, okay, fear is the number one problem in the human consciousness collective that keeps your energy and frequency down here. And it just is, it causes so many different core beliefs that keep you incredibly unintegrated and not really aligned towards ascension anyway. So, I agree with you. It's very as is above, as is below. It's very much aligning your higher aspects of you to the 3D aspects of you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have chosen, and you did choose it, in my opinion anyway, perception. You choose a 3D body, and you choose this experience. So why not align all fractals of you so that all frequencies of you are as high as possible and out of fear mode, so that if anything does happen like that, that you would be 100% not aligned to it. Like, I said this in my Ascension video recently. You wouldn't even, if something happened, it would be like, okay, I opened the newspaper and I saw a disaster on the other side of the world.
yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, if you're in fear, you're actually not going to be able to get intuitive insights that would tell you something is going to happen. Cats and dogs all know when an earthquake is
So
going to
true.
happen. They all find cover because they're not afraid all the time. But
Mhm.
we have the opportunity to feel fear when we don't even need to, when we're not even in danger. We bring it on ourselves. So if you're constantly feeling fear, you're actually blocking off your channel to receive intuitive guidance to get out of somewhere if you need to. That funny feeling in your gut, like, you know what? Something just isn't right. There's something in the air. It's too quiet. It's too still. I don't like how this is. It's just weird. You won't feel that because fear will mask that. So you want to try and live in the
Absolutely, because
moment
fear
as
brings you
purely
into
as you,
the fight or flight response will kick in, right? And then you don't
right,
have access to the part of your brain that helps you with those gifts,
exactly.
right? I mean, that's how I'm perceiving it. And that's why it's so important, in my perception, as we're going towards all of these massive changes. It's obvious to all of us that yes, a shift is happening, but I love your perspective on how to stay out of fear, and I noticed that you bring it up a lot. Um, and,
Guilty.
huh?
I said guilty. I do try and keep
Yeah.
people
Oh
away.
no, no shame involved. It's totally important in every teaching that we're offering. So I'm happy that you are. But what I noticed in your Atlantean Lemurian video, which I just love, I've watched it like 3 times now. I loved it so much. Um, you talk about how it's really hard for humans to understand, these reference points, because the human brain can't seem to grasp so much about the Atlantean, Lemurian, and original Akashic records of most humans that were here in the beginning of times of Earth, and how it was so different. And then that is why they can't seem to. That's why Atlantean and Lemurian history was lost, because our reference points have been lost as we are shifting and changing, and our brains are different, and our energy fields are different. So we don't have these reference points because our reference point now and our energy frequency now is so vastly different.
Right.
Does that mean that we actually have shifted and ascended some since then, you think?
Absolutely. That's a really good way to extrapolate on that. It absolutely does. We moved into another cycle, and as we moved into the other cycle, the whole energy of the cycles changed, the colors changed, we changed. And it's just kind of like incarnation. Another life is really another cycle.
Right.
So you're not going to remember everything from your other life. And the reason why is because you don't want it to affect you deepening the lessons in this life. It would be
I
complete
liked what you
overload. And
said
if the whole point is
about
to
that.
refine the lessons of Atlantis and Lemuria, we want to approach it completely forgetting them from another direction, in another energy, to really get to the core of what was happening there. So
So
that's
we
what I
had
feel
to
like is going
forget.
on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had to forget in order to, yeah, I was just about to say that. I really love your perception on that in that video as well, because you said that and that was so special to me when you said that, because I'm going through so much in my own, ascension process and awakening about forgetting. And I love it. I mean, so many people are always trying to help me remember. And and it puts people in fear mode when I forget everything. And I'm like, I just get downloads as necessary because I'm more of a 4D being. And
Totally. People are afraid of that.
yeah, and they're like, well, I'm scared. I'm so scared you won't remember me. Like my loved ones say that all the time. And I'm like, okay, well, that's why feel so connected to Source Within, that if I do forget, I'm going to go straight to that place within me that has those memories stored within, not my logical human 3D brain, but another part of me that causes my guides to come and kick in and say, okay, there's that download. You need this right now. You need that right now. You need to remember this, but not that. And it's shifting and changing daily, and it feels like such a beautiful thing. Because then if I want to remember something like Atlantis or Lemuria, or want to remember my records, I'm perceiving it in a new way every time I remember and every time I forget. And I feel like it's just so beautiful,
Because you're
and it's
reborn.
such a gift to forget. So I really liked what you said about how to access your core, and that's by forgetting things. Because I wonder if do you believe that it's important to do that, because when you forget something, like a Akashic record, like something major like that, are you experiencing it in a completely new and different and higher energy reference and higher energy field whenever you remember again, when you get there and you start to remember? Are you experiencing it all over again with these records?
Yes, you are. You'll never lose what you had. It'll always be there, but what you're allowing is you're giving so much respect to the moment. You're giving so much life to the moment. And in that, you are able to access deeper information, more information, different answers. If you're constantly anchoring yourself to old ways you thought and old ways you were and old ideas about people, you will only see new experience through those ways. So,
Yeah.
and it's the most beautiful way to experience the world is really truly through a baby's eyes, through that innocence and through that that forgetfulness, because that's the only way we'll really experience things as pure. And you can really trust yourself that anything that you've forgotten and that isn't coming back, you really didn't need. Same thing with people. I mean, if you let something go and it doesn't come back, you didn't need it.
For sure. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like this, it's gone. Okay, you can trust that magnetic resonance has determined that whatever you're made of and whatever that was made up is no longer for you, because if it was, it would be drawn magnetically right back to you, because everything is magnetic and resonant.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And forgetting allows that to really, really happen. I think it really accelerates things too.
Yeah, I think so too. I know that when that started happening for me and I began to just forget everything, I was only getting downloads as I was, as Source felt like I needed them. And it put me in this space where I fell into a little bit of confusion. There was fear at first. But then there was like, well, okay, people are telling me I'm forgetting and that that's bad. So I'm attaching personal meaning to that, which causes fear. I'm personalizing it. I'm not, disidentifying. But then the second stage of that was, okay, well, this is obviously not going to stop happening. So I have to flow with it. If that's going to be this way, I have to release resistance, because everything that is for a reason. And I don't even have to know that reason. I feel like I just flow within it and I'm like, okay, and it drives people crazy that are still very much, because we still have to operate businesses in 3D and we have relationships and we have jobs and, but it is not really affecting me that much because everything feels like it's just coming so as needed. I don't know if that's happening for you too. Like, are you going through that process where you're getting downloads and you're just utilizing it as needed? And are you okay when you forget?
Yeah, sometimes I feel really insecure about forgetting because there's still a part of me that wants to have control, that thinks that I'm in control. You know what I mean? Like I still
Yeah.
feel like, no, I need this because I'm in control. And then I realize that I'm co-creating my world with my higher self. So I know I'm absolutely right there with you, and I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
what do
like
you
in
mean
some
by
areas I'm okay
conscious
with it, and in
creation?
other areas it's more of a challenge.
Oh, okay. So when you say you're co-creating, are you you mean conscious creation, like basically creating all the time, based upon your reflections and your sharing creations? Or do you mean that more of an individual conscious creation from an individual perspective? What is your take on conscious creation?
Yeah, so in my mind, co-creating is essentially you letting go of the baton and passing it to your higher self for a while. You know, because I mean, I think that's what forgetting does too. Forgetting is kind of like, okay, I'm done. I realize I don't have the capacity for this. So I'm just going to let it go, and I'm going to co-create with my higher self. That's what conscious creation is. Conscious creation really breaks down in my mind to knowing when to be active and pursue things and create, and when to let go,
Mm-hmm.
and when to surrender, and when to let
Mm-hmm.
yourself be inspired, and let all the action happen behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of conscious creation, is really knowing your own rhythm. When you're going to be actively creating and when you're going to be letting go and letting it
Mm-hmm.
happen for you.
You make that sound so simple.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is, I love it, by the way, that so many people come to me and they're like, how do I really know that, that everything that, how do I trust when it's Source that's taking over and guiding me? How do I trust in my own guidance if that's just Source, or if that's just something that I want in my human desires and that's not for me? So how do I consciously, how do I go into conscious creation if I don't trust, like they're coming from these core beliefs and negative imprints where their emotions are grounded in a fear state? So what would you advise for people that are going through resistance, which causes lack of trust and fear of doing just that, fear of trusting that source is even in them to do that. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. You have to determine that what you're creating, what you're working on at the moment, you have to determine where you are wanting it from. So, is what you're creating a heart want? Is it something that you genuinely want from your heart? Or is it something that is an ego want? You have to begin to determine where your want is coming from. And if it's a want from the heart, then you can surrender to that, you can lean into that, and you can let go. And at the end of the day, if that's difficult too, if you're like, okay, great, Gigi, thank you. Like, I don't know if it's a heart want or an ego want. You just have to jump in. The number one thing that whenever I hear people ask, like, I don't trust surrendering to my higher self, the number one thing that I advise to do is to just let go. It means that the person's mind is trying way too hard to control things, and they need to just totally, totally surrender and let go. That to me is an indicator that feminine energy needs to become the main energy held within that individual. That to me is a surrendering energy that needs to come forward. And because it's not all about control, and if you're thinking too much and you're analyzing too much, then that's a symbol that you need to step back and let go and surrender.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
And then things will become clear. If at any time you don't have clarity and you're wondering, is this for me? Is this not for me? Turn off the mind. The mind is only ever going to show you where you've been. So turn that off. You don't need that. Access a different part of you. Let go. Let
I
something else
like what
come
you're
forward.
saying
And if it
about
takes
surrender.
practice, it takes practice. But
Hmm.
that's how you do it.
Yeah. What I'm finding in the surrender process when you're going through that and you just have this fear-based thing and you don't know if you're constantly creating, I find that surrender can be quite difficult for most people. That, that's why I created my surrender process, and I wanted to share with people how to sink into that fear and just let it take you over. Because if you do that, everyone will automatically, well, not everyone, but most people will automatically think, if I go into a surrender process and I start to feel what I don't want to surrender to, and to feel those emotions, I'm going to literally emotionally die, or I'm going to go into a dark night of the soul, or I'm going to have a heart attack. Like, some people are like, that will kill me. I've had people say that to me, and they get automatically in this place. When I say surrender, I get immediate resistance from people. Do you have any tips on how to surrender? And because I realize it's important, do you have any tips on how we can do that?
Yeah. Surrender is just kind of a shifting of focus. And it is the shifting of focus away from mind and into, for me, sensation. So surrender is, for me, it's kind of synonymous with meditation. Meditation
Hmm.
is surrender, and surrender is meditation. So that's how I view it. And I would just say the surrender is the progressive letting go. And sometimes the best way to do that is to bring your focus into your physical body and the sensations
Hmm.
in your physical body and the sensation
Hmm.
within your heart, and pull your mind back to like 30%, 20%, and try to get your mind, your awareness out of your mind and into your heart and into your physical body. That really helps with surrendering.
Okay. Okay. Um, when it comes to resistance, what I've noticed, with all this resistance, to the heart energy, it really, really seems like such a juxtaposed situation, because we're here with our heart center being in my perception, the primary reason why we're here. And if we connect to that, um, it causes emotions, which is awesome. But, and it guides us, and it's our blueprint. But, and that'll keep us out of ego if we're following that. But there's that other side of it that because there's so much duality on earth, and there's so much light versus dark, and sun and moon, and good and bad, and all of that, when we are surrendering, um, is that why you're saying that maybe we should go into a meditation in a possible way that we are disidentifying and then viewing our emotions from a higher perspective?
Hmm.
As a form of surrender, we are disidentifying instead. Would you advise that instead of sinking into the emotion and allowing it to overcome you and go into more of a shadow work process? Or is it just going to be individual based upon each person's particular level of expansion and existence here?
I think you could really, if you wanted to, you could, if you felt like doing the work and you didn't feel like it was going to overwhelm you, I think that you could surrender into your emotions and let them talk to you because your emotions have consciousness and you can talk to them and they'll talk to
Mm-hmm.
you. They'll tell you their story. They'll tell you why they're there, where they came from, where their root is, how long they've been
Mm-hmm.
there, this life, that life, whatever. They'll tell you. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to do that work, I think you can surrender into your emotional body and you can work with it. But perhaps the deepest level of surrender, because there's not really any activity at all, is really disidentifying with your emotions and your mind and just really trying to put yourself in that observer position. Because the more space that you can create between you and your kind of physical self, the easier it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you
Wow.
could go either way, but the deepest way I think would be to just go into observer mode.
Okay. Okay. I like that a lot because I feel like everyone's going to have a different way to do this and to stay in conscious creation, based upon where they are in their own spiritual development and emotional integrations. And what I'm noticing is, after I created the aura alchemy process, which is basically a shadow work process that brings you down to the shadow, you validate the inner child, and then you lift that portion of your being out of that negative core belief by validating your inner child and then asking her what new core belief she would like, and
Oh, I
asking her
love that.
what new feeling signature she would rather feel instead. And it lifts her out of the shadow, and it creates a new reference point and a new core belief, which brings you automatically to a higher frequency of energy, which I thought initially when I created that process, I'm like, okay, this is exactly where I want to be. I don't want people to be addicted to their shadows, which I'm finding a lot. I don't know if you're finding that when people are coming into these inner child work processes, that they're going through them and they're saying, I didn't get it. I didn't integrate. I didn't transmute or integrate anything. I didn't heal. And the shadow is still there, which isn't true, but their inner critic is so brilliantly operating and hanging on to that they are using shadow work as a way to stay stuck. So I created the resistance process, which no one likes to do because it's for resistant people. So they'll be like, well, I'm resistant to your resistance process. But I created the resistance process so that people could start with the inner critic first. And what I noticed is exactly in line with what you just said, is that when you talk to this portion of yourself that's causing fear and causing this resistance, and you just sort of start that spiritual line of questioning where you would say, well, why is that bad? Okay, you feel that way. I validate that you feel that way, but why is that bad? Why is it bad or wrong? What is the worst case scenario that could happen? But then I took it to a level where I also said, what is the best case scenario? What is the approval for you feeling this way? And then it seemed to put people in a place where the inner critic just kind of started to go over here. Do you find that's the case as well when you talk to that portion of yourself that seems to be representing your inner critic and causing these fears to remain resistant? What are you observing in the level that people can sink further into surrender? Does that seem to help them more when they talk to those portions of their being and get those answers?
Yeah, I think that everybody has their own kind of process, and I think that sometimes because we spend so much time in mind and
Mm-hmm.
analysis and we value logic so much that sometimes we need to have like a logic conversation with our emotions in order to actually understand them, get a sense of control and let it go.
Yeah.
That's like which is kind of what you're doing when you're dialoguing with your inner child or a traumatic time in your life. You're really just trying to get it into a place where you can understand it so you can finally let it go, where fear is gone. And yeah, so I think it can be really, really helpful for people to create that dialogue and almost like parent themselves, be the parent that they wish they had or the support that they wish they had.
And do you think that that helps people connect more to their divine feminine and divine masculine as needed when they do that?
Absolutely. I think absolutely, because sometimes which I think you might be getting at, is that sometimes there needs to be kind of a more masculine energy that comes forward, kind of a more fatherly energy, and sometimes there's maybe more of a nurturing energy, a more soft energy where you give permission to be soft. So I think that you really do allow yourself to have more depth in both polarities that you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I love your perception on the divine feminine and the divine masculine and how it's affecting us right now, because I'm noticing such a shift in the divine feminine becoming so much more prevalent than I've ever seen or remembered in any Akashic record before. Like right now, the divine feminine, especially in beings like you're just so goddess energy, and people feel so safe around you. And my clients that we share come to me and they're like, I have a session with Gigi and I just felt so safe because I just feel so loved, like that divine energy of unconditional love. And I like what you're representing in this 3D environment. So thank you for that. I really aligned with it. But what are we going towards in the next state? I know you discussed how at some point we're going to be entering the Egalitarian phase. And I'd like your take on that. And I know you said it would start with more divine feminine, which is what's happening right now. But what is the Egalitarian phase? How does it affect us? And is it just more of a balance of divine feminine, or is it just, what is it?
Exactly. It is exactly that. It is when the divine feminine and the divine masculine finally stand in perfect balance with each other. And in the past, we don't really have too many memories of this, but in the past, we had a matriarchy society. Just like right now it's a patriarchy, we did go through a long period where we were actually in a goddess society. And that goddess society, believe you me, got just as corrupt as this patriarchy did. And then we swung into the patriarchy. It's all about balance. So they were both corrupt. So now we're swinging into what I see as more of that egalitarian phase where we feel an insurgence of the divine feminine coming forward. We can see it we can see it now. We can see it kind of, coming forward and in our society. But I think that it's really just coming into balance. I think it's finally just coming up into balance. I don't think that it's going to take over. I think it's finally just going to be in balance again.
What would that look like for um, our societies? Would that look like intentional communities, perhaps, and the releasing of the monetary system, and all of that? What would it look like in your perception?
I think definitely an evolution of those things. I think that there will be more off-the-grid community, more off-the-grid communities, more communal living, more things like that if people so choose. But I also don't think that cities will disappear. I feel like if you were to really put one word with femininity, one of them would be intuition. And I think that that's where we're going to move in society is really having more intuition with each other. And a lot of things will dissolve. So many structures in our world are there because we don't trust each other.
Yeah.
Because we don't use our intuition. In fact,
So
one thing that drives me absolutely nuts that I really hope will go away is political correctness. You know what? We don't have to oversay things and be political correct all the time when we have a strong feminine center. Because one thing that femininity does and that energy does is it allows you to empathically feel what somebody means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you know where someone's coming from. And when that happens, we're going to get rid of a lot of corruptness as well. Because
exactly.
one thing that the feminine
because it
does
takes you right out of ego. Oh, I'm sorry for interrupting
It
you.
really does. A balanced feminine energy will bring nurturing
Yeah.
naturally. It'll bring compassion. It'll
And
bring depth
trust.
and
Yes.
trust. And all those systems that are based in not trusting each other and even in regards to money and stuff like that, a
Hmm.
lot of that will completely shift because we have a different view. We relate to each other differently because now the feminine energy is coming forward and it's allowing us to read each other and know our true intentions.
Hmm. Yeah. And that connects us right back to our heart center, which there is, I believe, I don't know about your perception on this, but from what I've noticed, um, from the point in time that a being projects into a human 3D body, an incarnation, if you'll notice that the first thing that forms, there are two things that form in a fetus: the spine and the heart. The spine is your seat of knowledge. It is all these things that you think you've forgotten, all of your, what humans call junk DNA, and all of this stuff from all of your Akashic records is every development of every form of being that you've ever been. It's right there for your knowledge and for your access. And, and the heart forms as well, like they're right thereafter. So I feel like it's such a balance that we utilize both of them, and it's such a beautiful thing that you're teaching that balance. I too come in with a purpose of balance, especially in spiritual teachings. It's so important that we are not going towards so much contrast in our teachings, because that too is fear mode. So I like that you are standing in the center of all of this and guiding us more towards the balance of utilizing everything as needed: your divine feminine, your divine masculine, your origins and Akashic records and spiritual abilities, and then your human side, as needed, in a way that you're accessing your core energy and your heart center pretty much all the time. And I love that balance. I love that you're teaching that. I would like to expand upon that further, because I absolutely loved your video. It was such a hit in my Facebook group. Just hundreds of people liked it and shared it, and it was all over Facebook. And at first when I saw it, I saw the title and I was like, oh boy, she is so brave. When you decided to do your video about, wasn't it called How to Tell If Your Spiritual Teacher is a Narcissist?
Yeah.
I love ethics and spirituality, and I feel like that you have a lot of courage to be able to discuss that so lovingly and authentically and truthfully. So I want to really get into that a little bit today, because I'm seeing so much fear that fear that's being triggered, and I don't feel like it's intentional or non-intentional or anything. It's just there, coming from spiritual teachings. And that is the last thing that I want from my followers and students and teachers and everyone that connects with me. That's the last thing that I want when we're discussing all of this, Ascension and our extraterrestrial aspects and our Akashic records and Atlantis and Lemuria, and people start to go directly to grays, reptilians, Zeta Reticulans are bad, they're harvesting your brain, they want your DNA, and all this sort of stuff. And it's just so fear-based, and I really liked that you came out with this video, because I really want to touch upon that. Like, how can we tell, for those of the people who are watching who haven't seen your video, how can they tell if their teacher is just a little bit too fear-based or is into narcissism, or both, and what should they do about it if that's the case?
Yeah, absolutely. So the video was inspired because I had clients and people who were negatively affected, like just that you were saying, and they were really struggling because they couldn't comprehend how an individual could have so much esoteric knowledge yet be hurting people or be a narcissist. They did not understand how someone can talk really good things and know so much about different dimensions of realities and ETs and whatever, yet not be good. So it's very important for us to understand that people can talk about spiritual concepts and metaphysics greatly, but it can be coming from a place of intellect, not heart
And
and not soul.
Right.
One of the first ways to know is if someone is, I mean, some people are going to share fear-based information because they believe it's true, and the mindset that they're working from is actually fear-based. In that case, you know, it's not really sinister, it's not really bad, it's just not good information, and you should just move on beyond the information because it's just not resonant with you. You know, there wasn't an intention, but there are spiritual teachers as well that will kind of teach because they are looking for energy, and that's where the narcissistic element came from. And so,
Oh, yes.
and one way to really do that is to really kind of sense where is the information coming from. If it's coming too much from a sense of intellect and too much from mind, and you can't sense a lot of emotion from it, a lot of personal experience, then that's really, it could be an indicator that this is not the best information for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way. It goes off in the video to name like a bunch of different things. But at the end of the day, the best way to ever approach any kind of spiritual teacher is to know that we're all students here. And anytime
Bingo.
anybody tries to tell you that they know more than you, that they have more access, oh, nothing drives me more up the walls. That if someone ever tells you that they have more access to a certain being or more spiritual energy or more psychic or they're more special than you, they have more ET DNA or they're from a special ET, run for the hills. I'm telling you. You know, if there, you know, if there's hierarchy is one of the biggest indicators of ego. And if someone's putting themselves in a hierarchy, even in the smallest way, ask questions. Either way, the experience is going to serve you because you're going to come closer to yourself. But, you know, it might be time to ask some questions if someone is more connected to source than you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get a little
Absolutely.
sassy about it because I really just want people to all be students talking about things. So.
I know, and I love that you say that. I just really honor and respect that. You know, bless you for bringing that to the spiritual communities and to the spiritual world and being, you know, just right up front about that and so authentic because it really bothers me as well. And that's one thing that I'm constantly telling everyone that watches my teachings and follows it. Yes, I'm teaching it, but I'm only teaching it because I learned it from you and myself, and I'm co-creating with you. I learned it from you, and then I experienced it, and then I mastered it, and then I taught it. And if it weren't for the other side of the fence with people learning that and triggering me to catalyze and integrate these components of myself, I would not be able to teach it. So I love that you're coming from a place of full humility in that space. You're just one of the most humble, authentic beings I know, and I love what you're doing. I just can't say it enough. I mean, it's so wonderful. It's so refreshing because I just see so many teachers out there that are kind of like, okay, this is the way it is, and that's it, and this is the knowledge, yes or no, black and white, this is that. I see you cringing. It's so cute.
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy because I feel like we're coming from a different perspective. Each of us are in different stages of our evolution, and we are integrating so many different things, and we're shifting in and out of different frequencies and aspects of ourselves, and our perceptions are so individual. And as you were stating, I think it was in the Atlantean Lemurian video where you were saying that there was that the Atlanteans and the Lemurians could not shift via individual perspectives. They shifted collectively. Instead, it seemed like they just all followed somebody. And it seemed like they just all got caught up in something. And as I call it in my group, they drank the Kool-Aid. We were discussing that in my group when I said, I'm not offering Kool-Aid. This is not a cult. You know, I am a member of your spiritual family, and I am no more greater or above or anything. Like, I'm right there at your level. You know, I may have access to gifts, but I work just as hard to develop them. And you can get to the same place that I can or that Gigi can, you know, or that we all have that same access to source within us. It doesn't matter, you know, your origins or how many aspects are within you, or if you were born with the gift or if you weren't. It's all about integrating the emotions and then I mean, in my opinion, disidentifying from them and learning from them, and then stepping outside the emotional perspective when need be. And it's all about the balance of doing all of these things and integrating and then transcending the levels of human suffering that are unfortunately so prevalent in the human consciousness collective. And I just love that you're bringing that to the table. So how do people get out of the follower modality when they're just feeling so disempowered and they're aligning with spiritual teachers based upon their fear mode that we were discussing earlier? What would you suggest to them that they do personally to stop fearing what their teacher is saying and to kind of disconnect from that information as you were discussing? What tips would you offer us to do that? Because it can be such an interesting dynamic when you've been with a spiritual teacher for a while and you trust them and they've been incredibly accurate and in tune and they've told you things that have really been helpful and they've been guiding you for a while. It seems like you form, an interdependent relationship that can easily become codependent. So how do you get out of the codependence, which puts the student in fear mode?
Yeah, oh, it's so heartbreaking, isn't it? When you trust somebody and they give you good information and then you're like, ah, but the first part is to forgive yourself. To forgive yourself for maybe following something, or maybe to forgive yourself for giving a piece of you to someone else when you should have held on to it. I think
Now, would you
to
say
really
it's
forgive
important to
yourself.
forgive for the reasons of getting the inner critic out of the way, like validating and kind of not beating yourself up for putting yourself in the position in the first place? Because a lot of people do that. They're like, gosh, I'm so stupid. I'm so this. I'm so that. And I'm so, and that doesn't help either, right?
Absolutely. And forgiveness also allows you to hold on to whatever teachings you did get from that person. Because at the end of the day, even if someone came from a more sinister direction, no one's actually ever teaching you anything. You're always the person who's teaching you, and you're always absorbing information based on your higher self. They're just providing things. So the tragic thing about realizing that you've been following a teacher who maybe isn't the best or you've grown out of is that once you separate from them, you feel like every part of you that grew, every part of you that's better now doesn't exist anymore. You feel like all that growth that you did because you learned it from someone who you don't resonate with anymore doesn't count.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Because that person fell off the pedestal, you now negate all of the teachings that you benefited from. So you also have to acknowledge that they weren't really truly teaching you. You were teaching you. So you have to kind of empower yourself and forgive yourself. And allow yourself to feel whatever sense of betrayal and pain that you've been experiencing too, and mourning whatever as well. And know that, okay, so now I realize that this teacher that I've been following probably didn't have the best intentions in their teachings or had a fear base in teachings. Well, now I know how to recognize that. And now moving forward, I'm going to follow, or I'm going to approach things really differently, and the knowledge that I get is going to be more powerful because you've been through it already.
Yeah, I mean, and as you stated about conscious creation, they are playing that role. They are playing the role to help you get through and integrate something that needs love. There's a part of you that it could be a core belief of disempowerment. I notice that a lot where people have core beliefs where they don't feel very empowered. And it aligns with these type of teachers to step in and sort of tell them what to do. And that really, really bothers me because, and it also bothers me when people accuse me of telling them what to do because I'm the first person to say, okay, this is my information. This is what I'm perceiving. But, this is not me telling you how to live your life. You always have source within you. And at any moment, and I tell my clients and friends and family, if any moment you ask me something and I share something with you and you're not aligned to it and you're not connecting to it, disidentify from it and say, I'm sorry, I'm not aligning with that. That's not really in alignment with me right now for some reason. So I'm going to set that aside and not personalize that or try to figure it out too much. Maybe I'll come back to it later. Maybe I won't, but I'm going to put it in the spiritual recycling bin. And I tell that to my clients as well. Don't let me, it would never be intentional because that's not my personality, but unintentionally step in when you ask a question and I offer specific advice, because I'm a reference point type of teacher as well, where if you want a reference point, I'll give you one based upon my perception, but it is only my perception. And it's so important to know that that's my perception of you in this snapshot of whatever electromagnetic frequency you are operating in this moment, and whatever life purpose you are here to go through, and whatever you're trying to integrate. That's my perception based upon that. But you can change it. You can change your own future because you are consciously creating. So if I tell you something that's not looking so good, you know, some of us, we're not trying to disempower you. We're trying to get you to be proactive in making a change to that. If I'm going to tell you, oh, you know, it's looking bad in your marriage, then you would really start to, if that doesn't align with you, you would really start to say, okay, what can I do? You know, do I really want this marriage? Where's my heart center in this? You know, because some people aren't really ready to hear information as well. So then that unintentionally puts them in a place where they're feeling like their teacher is disempowering them when they're not aligning because they're not ready, and they're still aligning to an ego-based place. Say if the marriage were the you know, specific situation, and someone came to me and said, you know, you told me my marriage is not looking so good, and that really felt disempowering. I would say, okay, that doesn't mean that it is yes or no or right or wrong. It is a perception, and you utilize that knowledge and perception to be able to consciously create something that you want from your heart space. You can toss my information into the garbage right away. That would be more empowering than to say, oh, Pamela's the extrasensory luminary. She's, you know, this or that. Or I hate the word guru when people say, you're the guru, you're the teacher, you're the this, you're that. No, I'm a spiritual alchemist. I'm a person, an alchemist stirs the pot so that you can mix all of everything, all these perceptions together. That is my role. It is about balance. And I just really, nothing gets me worse than people who are disempowered on both sides of the fence, and they're just kind of pointing fingers. You did this, you did that, you did that. Everyone on each side should step up into their empowerment. See, now I'm getting
absolutely. And about what you were saying, isn't it interesting how you could give the exact same reading to a few different people? One person might accuse you of giving them too much specific information or too predictive. Another person may not even take it that way.
Yeah.
And completely interpret it their own way. So I think that everybody has a predisposition whether or not to look at someone as their savior or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has just been so good. We have a little bit of time left. Do you mind if we start going into questions now?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So this question is at the top of the screen. It's from Lois, and she's asking, how did you know you were ready to step out and become the public guide that you are now?
This was difficult for me. One of your topics this month is facing fears. And I'm a really shy person. I'm a very to myself person. And I never truly felt right about going into the public in any way. It took me a long time. But how I did know that I was ready was because it was just such an overwhelming feeling. And I was just so in love with people who were YouTubing and who were writing and who were really sharing information on such a grassroots level. Like, to me, YouTube is such a grassroots level of information for people, and it really inspired me. So it kind of like built up to the point where I had to. It was just like I just had to. I can't explain it. It's like having to go to the bathroom or something. Like, you just have to.
Yeah, it's just time, and then you just one day burst out of that bubble, and you're like, here I am. And of course,
but it was a struggle. It was a struggle for sure.
Yeah. Did you have to integrate a lot of core beliefs that related to, I know for me personally, and if this is too personal, you don't have to answer, but for me, I was under the rock spiritually for 16 years. And I had clients, but they were through companies that were hiring me. I didn't have my own website for the first 16 years. And then these clients started to be like, well, I don't really understand why you have to work for this company. And I'm like, because if I don't, like, I'm so fear mode. I'm like, because if I don't, people are going to know and they're going to judge. And it's this. So, like, did you fear judgment or anything like that when you were coming out, a little bit more with this?
Yeah, I did. I definitely feared judgment, especially because some of my work leaned heavily into extraterrestrial stuff, which I feel like is second or third wave information. Um, so there's definitely a little bit of apprehension there. But I think it's just a general, for me, it's a general fear of feeling overexposed that I have to always work on.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you
Or
were
being
doing that,
misunderstood.
what's that?
Or overexposure and also being misunderstood. I have kind of this weird feeling, probably past life, that I would say things and people would hear something totally different and then I would be like punished for it. I had a lot of kind of past life persecution themes that would come forward and stuff as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm sure that it catalyzed you, though, to really get to that authentic place that you are now, which we love, by the way. So many people love that about you. And it just draws more people to you when you can just show that fear as well and talk about that as well. Because I know that I really, really, really was pretty closed off when I first got out into the public eye. I'm like, all right, these are my teachings and this is what I'm about and this is what I'm going to do and that's it. And 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 I was so afraid, and then finally I was just like, you know what? I just have to step into my heart space to be able to share with the public more of who I am, what I'm experiencing, how I'm learning my teachings, how I got there, how I was catalyzed, why it's meaningful to me. And when I did that, and I noticed for you too that the more of your videos I was watching, you just got more bold and you were stepping like fully into your authenticity, and you just got, especially with that last video that we were talking about earlier, you're just so courageously going for a topic that seriously, I mean, hands down, I still am a little tentative about that topic. I wouldn't have done it. So I was so happy for you because I felt like people could really relate to that on such a deep level, and the teachers and students and people the luminaries that are here right now in this particular shift of human consciousness are about authenticity. They are stepping into authenticity, and you're just absolutely right where you should be with it, in my opinion. So that's just
Oh,
awesome.
thank
I'm going to go
you.
on to another question. Okay, let's see. Raylene is asking, what if you see a lot of visions and meditations, but you have no idea what it means? And she's saying that she sees a lot of faces, numbers, and she sees different things like that, and she doesn't know how to interpret it. What should she do?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways I feel like you could approach this is because it's visual, sometimes it can help to get a dream journal
Mm-hmm.
and kind of get a little bit of an understanding of archetypes, visual archetypes, because a lot of the times our subconscious mind will communicate with us through visual archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of get a dream journal out and see if that can trigger anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can also, one thing that pretty much is like a no fail is really invest in a really good relationship with your spiritual guides. Really get good at dialoguing with your higher self, because when you open up your higher self, it's like a briar patch of questions that you're going to come into. And the best person to guide you in those things is actually your higher self, the person who's sending you those images to begin with. So all those weird images are coming from somewhere. So ask the person that they're coming from, the energy that they're coming from, ask them to kind of refine themselves. Anytime you get an image or an energy that you don't quite understand, do not be afraid to ask your higher self or your guides to give you another one or give you clarity Don't be afraid to refine that energy until you understand it. And then if that isn't working, don't be afraid to completely let it go so it can then come back to you in a different form as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and your
That's what
guides
I
will
would
do
say.
that, especially because, and I'm glad that you bring that up to ask the higher self, because your most dominant spirit guides are nothing but integrated versions of your higher self, in my
Yeah.
opinion. I don't know if you share that opinion, but
Mm-hmm.
it just feels like it's just you. And so many people come to me and they're like, well, I'm having problems differentiating the telepathic information that I'm getting in my precognition and my clairvoyance and my clairaudience, because it sounds like me when I ask a thought and then I get an answer. It just sounds like my thoughts. Or if it's clairvoyance, it just looks like a daydream. And I've been trying to express to people for a little while that when you integrate these lessons that you're here to learn, and you integrate these traumas and emotional things that really need integration, these subdominant spirit guides who are waiting on your acceptance, they are you. And you integrate them, and they come in as a part of your being, and they are your fractals of your higher self, and they are you. So it is going to sound like you when you get clairaudience and you get a voice in your head and you're like, well, it's just my voice. I'm like, yeah, that's you. Source is you. You are source. There is nothing more empowered than that when it comes in your voice, because you're integrated. And that means that you're right on track if it sounds like you. I mean, do you share that perspective?
Great observation. Absolutely. Absolutely. If the first communication is going to feel a lot like you're talking to yourself,
Hmm.
that's a good
Yeah,
sign. Absolutely. The more
yeah.
that you focus and the more that you listen without judgment, the more you'll notice slight differences, slight feelings in
Hmm.
the energy, slight difference in
Hmm.
personality, slight difference in sound. And the more you tune
Hmm.
in, the more you invest in that, the more you'll see it. And that's when you do get the subdominant guides, or the guides that you haven't met yet. That's when they come forward, because when you understand how to differentiate one guide, then you can really differentiate many different ones. And then you're like cooking with gas, and you can do it.
Yeah, let's dig into that for a moment, because that's something that I teach people how to do, is how to differentiate between the guides, and especially when they're subdominant guides, it can get a little different versus when they are dominant portions of your being. Subdominant guides seem like they're really acting in a space where they are they're giving like the signs, the numbers, and they're giving you signs in the external. And that's when people come to me and they're saying, I keep seeing this sign and that sign and this sign. And that seems like subdominant guides work a lot in that way. But there's still versions of yourself waiting to be integrated. So they are guiding you back to you. So I find it just so relevant when we pay attention to that as well. But based upon our etheric abilities, these guides are going to connect to us in extremely different ways. There's not one way. If you have a dominant gift of clairvoyance, you're going to get a lot of daydreams. Now, I call them daydreams so that you understand what clairvoyance actually looks like when you are. It's not going to be like what you think. It's not going to be like, oh, your guide is standing outside of you. I mean, for some people it is, but for the majority of the people that are coming to me when they first are awakening, are you noticing that, with clairvoyance and clairaudience and precognizance, that you're not seeing things that are outside of yourself at first? That doesn't seem to happen at first. It seems like clairvoyance looks like a daydream. It doesn't look like a guide that's standing in front of you. It doesn't look like that at first. That's a different stage of development.
Oh, yeah. I mean, physically having beings manifest in front of you is most likely going to be the last stage of clairvoyance. It is the rarest stage, and the last stage. Usually, those physical manifestations that are very obvious are for wide open clairvoyance, which are quite rare, or when you're in harm or danger. And they
Hmm.
actually have to pierce through and manifest physically. I think that, I mean, in reality, the discovery of your guides is also really the discovery of yourself. So your guides and your connection with them, they will always, always, always hide in the part of you that you need to learn, that you need to
Yes.
discover. So they will use you connecting with them as a way for you to uncover the part of yourself that you need to at this time. And so if you're a clairvoyant, you're probably going to get visions, you know, uh, in meditation when your eyes are closed, or scrying, staring into a crystal ball, a black mirror, or a crystal or water, that's where you're gonna get that. If
Mhm.
if you're an empath, you're gonna get a feeling of their energy.
Mhm.
And then if you are a claircognizant, you're just going to get a very strong knowing that they're there, and a very strong knowing that they're different, that there's something different, that they're there, and you're going to get a download that you'll eventually unravel if you're clairvoyant.
Yeah, and you can tell those downloads because they seem really bizarre from what I've noticed with claircognizance when downloads come in, and that I can tell they're not mine because when I get a download from a guide and it's my stuff and it's just my memories that, like I was telling you before, that I don't remember a lot, and my guides need to give me a download to remember something, I'm like, I immediately connect. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. But if it is a download from something that my guides are trying to get me to look at, say, for the future and something that I haven't integrated yet, it seems a little different and it can be bizarre because they have to make it bizarre in order to wake you up. That's why dreams are so magically bizarre, and you'll see like yourself and in a horse's head, and then you're like, why the heck did my guys have to do something so freaking weird? Because they really want to get your attention.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it will be weird. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and when you're not wanting to
It'll
like
get your
go into
attention
those,
and it'll be weird.
oh, I'm sorry.
I just said it'll absolutely be so weird and it'll get your attention.
Yeah, and it has to be that way because if as you're saying, Gigi, if your guides are trying to operate to get you to look at a portion of you and you have fear and you have resistance, they have to make it pretty eye-catching. So those downloads will
Totally.
come in and it'll be like, okay, I just got something and I'm not really understanding what it is, and I'm just getting this sudden knowingness of something that it almost feels like a deja vu, except it's a little too weird.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's your indicator that it's important.
Yeah. Yeah. I had one of those today when I was cleaning out an area of my desk where I keep a lot of crystals. And I found this little stone and it was shaped in a heart. And it was a really rare stone that I found a long time ago, like back last year. And my guides were trying to get my attention about something. And then I looked, and someone that I really care about had found a stone that was heart shaped at the same time that I had found it. And I happened to be thinking about a specific question in relation to that person. So they were trying to give me the answer to that question in the form of a heart, that we both happened to discover like at the same time. And it blew my mind because I went, why did I look in this drawer? Well, because you guys told me I need to clean out the crystals. Okay. Why did I find that? Okay. What do you want me to know? And it just came across as sort of like okay, do you want us to get more bizarre than that? Do you want us to wake you up more than that? What else do you need to know that you can trust that person? Is when something like that happens. And they can get pretty bizarre, and I'm pretty clear about asking because I'm a seeker, and I never shut up with my guides, and I'm constantly like, tell me, tell me, tell me, tell me, tell me. And they're like, we're not going to tell you, but we will guide you and you will find these synchronicities. And that's a very bizarre thing that these guides do.
Because
Yeah.
they don't want to take your power away. They don't want,
Yeah.
like, guides are just learning like we're learning. They're evolving like we're evolving, and they want to honor our free will as much as possible. And if they're just telling us exactly, it kind of infringes on that a little bit. It infringes on our level of self-discovery, and it kind of defeats the purpose. So that's why some of these ways that guides communicate are so backwards or so indirect, is because they really
Hmm.
want you to be as close to doing it yourself as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the ultimate empowerment, and probably a big reason why we're here is to, if you're connecting with source and you're trusting, then you're out of fear, which brings you to your empowerment, which is probably the reason why you're going through all this contrast and 3D stuff in the first place, to be able to choose, because we're So many people think that humans are just at the bottom of the barrel, and that really bothers me, because you're not. You are a divine, multidimensional, infinite light being, many fractals thereof. So when you finally choose you've had all these experiences of being a light being, and you choose to devolve into a third dimensional incarnation of a lower density body, and then to say, oh, you're just human, that's so invalidating, because it's hard. It's hard to devolve and then evolve again, and then keep doing it over and over again. And you have to think about what empowered beings we must be to make that very difficult choice, and then to trust Source, and then to get a false perception of separation from Source by being incarnated into a human body, and then have to remember that we were never separated to begin with. Like, how beautiful and empowering is that? You know? And then humans are like,
different perception.
Oh, this human stuff, it's so boring, it's so this, it's so that, and it's so hard. And I'm like, yeah, but that's
if it's
because
boring,
Source
you're not
believes
doing it
that
right.
you can do it. Yeah, Source believes that you can do it. Source believes that, you know? So, are you saying that Source screwed up?
Yeah. People feel safe. People feel very, very safe living in the basement of their lives. And that's the bottom line. People feel very, very safe hiding out in the basement, because at least nothing else can go wrong, and at least they're in total control of their reality, even if it's a bad one.
Except that they're not.
Except that they're
like
not.
These reflections are going to keep coming, and the shadows are going to get deeper, and the contrast is going to get worse. And
Exactly.
That's what I tell people. I'm like, do you want to do it the hard way or not? Because you must be an incredibly brilliant light being, that your ego and your inner critic is so strong, is so resistant, that you're like, okay, here's some 5-dimensional processes, but I'm going to beat myself up with shadow work for a few years first. The reason you do that is because you are bored and you want to learn it the hard way. So honor that part of you that is that complicated, that wants to do it the hard way. But when you're done doing the hard way, really, truly believe that you can be done. Believe in your own divinity, you know? So I want to go ahead and ask another question. This person is asking, this is from Bjorn, and he says, is it possible to be ascended and not be aware of it?
Great. Hi, Bjorn. Yeah. I would say that there are lots of people going through this process of realigning with their higher selves, of integrating their higher dimensional aspects, and they're not aware of it. I absolutely think that it's possible. I think that they might not be able to give names to it. They might not be able to be like, well, I am coming from a 4D level and a 5D level, and my guide is this guide. And they might not be able to get into like these intricacies that you can if you really are studying it. But I think that you will. I think that you can absolutely go through this process in your own way. You'll become more self-aware. You'll become more in your purpose. You know, you'll experience a lot of fear. You could definitely go through it without being fully aware. But I think it's probably more likely that you would become aware, because you just end up asking so many different questions. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too, because in my recent shift into more of the 4D perspective, I noticed that I was handling my own emotions differently, because from a 3D perspective, I would go into the shadow and then I would cry, which is fine, because some of us need to do that first. I definitely did. I'm no exception.
I'm higher.
Okay? I definitely did. I had to feel it. But then when I got to a 4D perspective, I started noticing that even if I was triggered, and triggers don't go away, guys. As long as you're in a human body, triggers are not going to go away. You're going to be catalyzed no matter what level you are. So when I was triggered, I started reacting very differently. Like, I would just sit through a trigger and I would have a terrible fear. And instead of like hiding or becoming resistant, I would actually just let myself sink into it. And first I would sink into it, and then I would just be completely deep within it without any fear that it was going to emotionally devastate me, without any fear that it was never going to stop, because that's where a lot of people, I'm noticing that a lot of people go towards that when they surrender to a fear. They, especially during triggers that are really catalyzing and difficult and traumatic, their fight or flight response kicks in, and you're automatically like, your inner child doesn't distinguish that from death. Like you think that that's death somewhere in your subconscious. So that's why people experience panic attacks, and dark night of the soul and things of that nature, because you have to sink into it. And if you don't sink into it and trust source that you can get through it, it's going to get worse. So I sunk into it, and then I would come out of it in a very quick amount of time. Like I had a terrible trigger about a week ago. It was like just this fear of like losing people I love was the specific trigger. And I'm like, all right, well, how do I want to handle this from this perspective? And I noticed at the moment I sunk into it and really, really just cried and just really felt it, it started to shift to where I felt like I was looking at my own emotion from a different perspective. And then I was like, oh, that's why you have that. That's why you have that, because you've never done this before. And you're like a baby in this. And babies cry like when they need their moms, or when they need food, or when they need something, or when something scares them, they cry until they get a reference point for what is happening. And that's what my inner child was doing. She was saying, oh, this is new. She wasn't coming from a shadow place, actually. And I was surprised that she wasn't coming from trauma. She was just like, oh, this is new, and you're crying because you want reassurance. You want nurturing. And she told me, she said, ask for reassurance. Ask to be nurtured. Ask to be reminded that you are loved. So I did. And the thing happened that you don't expect to happen, because your inner critic steps in and is like, don't do that. That's needy. Don't do that. That's, you're codependent. You're this, you're that. You're not strong, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it anyway. And I formulated that proof for my inner child when I got love and I got reassurance and I got the nurturing and I got what I was needing. And then I'm like, oh, that wasn't even a shadow component. That was just me naturally doing what humans do when they don't have a reference point. So I had to find that reference point and figure out how. And it was such a different thing, because when you have something that you're working through that triggers you, but it's not coming from a shadow, it's coming from you consciously trying to create something of which you have no emotional reference point. And then it gets to be okay that you don't have a reference point, which is even better. So for me, it's very, very different.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the point that you made about sometimes when you do the emotional work and you go into something and you think it might be dark and scary, sometimes it's actually totally not. And it's actually totally healing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you wake up, when you come up from that and you come up from air, it feels like, in my process I created called Surrender, I described a point in time where I actually literally thought I was going to drown. And I had some fears of the ocean because that an undertide pulled me under. And that was how I learned how to surrender, because I thought, well, I'm going to connect with my guide. Am I going to die? He's like, does it matter? Because if you fight with the flow of the undertow, and the riptide that was pulling you under, you're not going to get anywhere. That is complete resistance. So I had to really, in that moment, in a very serious way, trust and not feel like my fight or flight response was going to be beneficial. My fight or flight response could have killed me. So don't always listen to the fight or flight response. It's not always helpful when it comes to your emotions. I'm being very, very metaphorical there, but it's not always going to be the best thing in the world for you. We're running out of time. We only have a few more minutes, but I wanted to answer this question because it really interested me. And this is from Beck. And she's asking, I would love your perspectives on bipolar disorder. When I intuitively look back at my experience with it, I realized it came about as a result of a massive rejection of the self and the emotional self from a young age. What is your understanding of the cause of bipolar disorder and how to heal it?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I love that, Becktown. I love that you are in recognition of what caused the bipolar disorder. I think that you actually already know. For me, a lot of personality disorders are due to a not accepting of oneself or a splitting of oneself. And so for bipolar, I really associate bipolar with a rejection or not accepting of one's creativity, of one's heart. And whenever we don't accept a part of ourselves, or we reject it, or even if we hate it or deny it, whenever we do that, what we do is we split ourselves. Because what we're saying by not accepting it, we're saying that we cannot be one. By not accepting ourselves, what we're feeling, our creative gift, whatever it is, we are saying, I cannot be one. So what do? You split. You become two. If you're, so that's really where, having this kind of swinging up and down comes from. It's yourself. It's your consciousness trying to get you back into accepting yourself through extreme ways. That's what I see from a higher level.
Mm-hmm. I'm noticing with bipolar disorder that a lot of the symptoms of bipolar disorder that doctors and psychiatrists express are actual, mental illness symptoms, for lack of just for human definition and reasoning here from what they say it is. These symptoms appear to correspond with ascension symptoms and spiritual awakening development. Have you noticed that as well? That when they're
I really have.
It's manic. Yeah, you have grandiosity. I went through that. Where a lot of my family around me. Yeah, right. Yeah, and I'm like, it's very disempowering. When the doctors come in and they're like trying to diagnose people and they're taking your power from you when they're saying you're this, you're that, here's your smacked on label, here's your box, better operate within it. Those come from core beliefs of powerlessness right there. That's where it manifests from, that, in my opinion. And these symptoms like the mania, work with it. Oh my goodness. If I were to get examined by a doctor right now, he would say I'm completely stable, but he would also say, why don't you sleep? We're going to have to look at this further because you might be passing all my tests, but why don't you sleep? And they would start to question that as a possible symptom of hypomania. I have not slept since I was a baby. Do babies have hypomania? Sometimes you're just born with a certain level of energy frequency, with these certain core personality components based upon your spiritual etheric gifts that you come in with. Not sleeping actually really helps me sometimes. And during those times, my guides just say, yeah, right now you're going to be having this go on. Right now, you're not going to want to eat much. Right now, you're going to be overtly sexual. Right now, you're going to be not sleeping. Right now, you're going to be talking too much. Right now, these things are going to be happening because you're receiving massive downloads of information. So I got to the point where, as opposed to medicating that away, which is exactly what I feel that people are doing when they take these psychiatric medications, you are saying, I submit to powerlessness and I dampen my light. I dampen my gifts. How sad is that? So when I said, you know what, no, this is a part of me, and whatever it is that's causing this, I'm going to love it and love it and love it because that part of me needs love. I completely agree with what you're saying. Completely agree. And it's the same with schizophrenia, in my opinion, that when these aspects, they are just split portions and fractals of your being, and they're talking to you because they want you to shine the light of divinity onto them. They want you to hear them, validate them, and love them. So that is why I teach my clients who have schizophrenia. I try to recommend that they speak to these aspects of their inner selves and say, okay, this, for example, I had a person come to me yesterday and she said, my inner voice that talks to me is saying to me that I'm going to hurt people. And it makes me feel bad. It's connecting me to my negative imprint of I am bad and I'm worthless and I'm dangerous and all these things. And I said, okay, talk to this portion of your being. Validate this portion of your being. Don't try to make it different than what this portion of your being believes that it is. So, I recommended to her that she would speak to this portion of her being and say, you know what? I invoke the I am to give you permission to be exactly as you are. If that is what you believe about me, then that's what you believe. That's okay. You get to be in that space for as long as you get to be in that space. And I love that portion of you that believes that I'm dangerous. I love that portion of you that says this about me. I love that portion of you that can't love me. I love that portion of you that feels that she can't do these things. It's not about right or wrong. It becomes a validating divine light of unconditional presence so that you can love yourself. it sets you up so that you can love yourself.
Absolutely.
So,
And by doing that, love unifies.
Yeah, yeah, yes. And then you can integrate that, because those portions of your being aren't going to want to integrate without it, without that unconditional presence and love. So, if you're beating yourself up with all these deep, dark processes and you stay there, you're effectively trapping yourself. If you're taking psychiatric medications to prevent yourself from feeling, you're effectively trapping yourself in powerlessness. And yeah, so I'm going to wrap it up now. This was awesome. Is there anything else that you want to share with us today, Gigi?
Um, just gratitude and just thank you. And it's such a pleasure to connect with you, Pamela, and everyone here and everyone that asked questions. And I think you have such a beautiful energy, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you again and following your work, and just so much gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. You can find her at www.gigiyoung.com. Is that right? Did I get it right?
That's
I
right.
think I got it right. Okay, and I am at aurareader.com. You can find her on YouTube as Gigi Young, and I really, really suggest that you look into, some of her sharings and teachings. They're just absolutely full of authenticity, and she's just a real breath of fresh air to the spiritual community, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for your presence, in this spiritual community, and you're exactly what we need in this new era. We need that authenticity, and we need someone that we can really relate to, just stepping out of fear mode and just being able to be completely present with us and be your full authentic self. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot to step into that. So I just, I honor that light in you. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I
You
look
as
forward to doing this
well.
again. I'm going to wrap it up, guys. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.